Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Yip, and I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at Coupa. I'm responsible for our digital payments solution. My perspective of this industry comes from over 2 decades of experience building products at the intersection of finance and large-scale technology. Throughout my career, especially during my time at Coupa, I've had the opportunity to work with many finance teams to look under the hood. And let me be honest with you, despite all the technology advancements, there's still an incredible amount of friction. I talk to teams, and they're spending hours every month with manual processing. Teams are spending over 1 day per week just figuring out what invoices to pay. They would download their data from all sorts of different systems into spreadsheets, do some VLOOKUPs, run pivot tables, and then manually select what invoices to pay. And I talk to teams where they're paying thousands of suppliers in one payment batch, but they're opening every single invoice attachment one by one and manually checking the payment account information. And we also know teams are spending over 26 hours a month just to reconcile data. That's over 3 working days. It's really eye-opening to see that in 2026, we're still having all these finance professionals doing this manual work. We've been talking about digital transformation for the past decade as the ultimate goal. But in this day and age, digital transformation is not the finish line, it's just the beginning. The new mandate is AI imperative. Success is not measured by whether you're digitizing your work. It's measured by whether you're able to get to near total, completely touchless processing and real-time fraud management and cash flow optimization. But there's one hurdle to realizing that vision. We at Coupa just released our annual CFO report, and it uncovered a massive execution gap. 85% of the 600 global leaders we interviewed are saying that AI is central to their business strategy. But 92% of these leaders say that they fear that they cannot implement the AI vision. Why is that? It's not because AI is not smart enough. It's because the data foundation is broken. Fragmentation of data is the primary constraint to realizing AI value. We have 5% of the CEOs saying that they only have access to instant total spend data in a single system, while many of them are struggling between 5 or 6 legacy systems just to get a clearer picture. And when your data is siloed, your AI is blinded. You can see your payments data, but maybe you can't see your contracts data. You can see your invoice spend, but you cannot see your supplier risk. Second problem that they're saying, and also published by this report, is that 76% of CFOs say that unclear ROI is the barrier to implementing AI. If you can't measure your success in terms of hours or dollars saved, you can't prove success to your board. Third, it's around trust. We know that when we're moving millions of dollars around, you can't just trust a black box AI to do the work. So what should you be thinking about as you think about implementing AI in your companies? Every company that's coming to you tells you that they're an AI company and they have an AI solution. I want to offer you a 3-part framework on how to think about it when you choose an AI solution. Number 1 is data integrity. We know that if your AI is not built on top of centralized data, it's flawed. Garbage in, garbage out. Layering AI on top of disconnected systems will not solve your problem, it will only scale them. And you can't make strategic decisions based on broken data sets. We at Coupa just celebrated our 20th anniversary this year. And at the very beginning of our journey, we made a strategic decision to get permission from our customer to collect all their spend data. We scrub them, we anonymize them, and we normalize them to build our platform. And we use that data ethically, securely, and with strict governance, and built out our AI foundation. And today, we have a total of over $9.5 trillion of global spend on our platform. And that's how you scale and teach AI to recognize patterns. Another thing to keep in mind is measurable impact. We know that you need to be able to measure your ROI accurately. I talked about AP teams spending hours every week just figuring out what invoices to pay. So to combat that, we released a payment batch creation agent. And what it does, it allows your teams to just use natural language to tell the agents what type of invoices you want to pay. So for example, maybe you say, find all top invoices for my top 10 suppliers that offer early pay discount for greater than 1%. And AI can do the work in the background for you, and teams can easily measure the number of hours saved every week. That's measurable impact. And last but not least, is around trust. Show of hands, how many folks here own a Tesla or know somebody who owns a Tesla? Okay, quite a few. How many of you use the self-driving mode on your Tesla? Okay, fewer hands than I expect. I know many people in my network that do that. But how many of you who use it today used it on day one? Probably not many. Trust is built incrementally. And that's also how we think about building AI. We're working on an approval agent where an agent can review all your payments before it goes out the door. We review and see if there's any anomaly in the payments. Are you paying a supplier a higher amount than normal? Are you paying them more frequently than normal? And are you paying a brand new account that you just set up a large amount of money? But we don't expect our users to trust the agent on day one and release millions of dollars out the door. So the way we think about it is almost like a trial mode concept, where you run the agents, AI will show you a summary of its reasoning, but you still include a human to do a final inspection before releasing the payments. And as you build trust over time, if you've seen the agent run 10, 20, 100 times, then you trust it to run autonomously. It's like looking over the shoulders of your intern when they first start a job. Once you inspect their work enough times, they gain your trust, then you let them run on their own. So in closing, I think we can all agree that AI is playing a big role and creating a big impact in the finance and procurement space. That 92% execution gap is intimidating, but as long as you prioritize data integrity, measurable ROI, and trust and control, I think we can figure this out and implement our AI strategies. But it's 2026, and we know that AI isn't the only thing that is top of your mind. So there are other topics I want to dive into, and I would love to invite my fellow panelists to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Let's get some people up here to join you. Everybody, please welcome to the stage Adam Paul and Reg Butler. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, guys, we've got a lot to get through. We'll give Michelle a chance to drink and a bit of a breather. So why don't we work down the line, Adam and Reg? Maybe you want to give us a brief intro to yourselves, a little about your role and responsibilities, and I guess a couple of things that are on your agenda at the moment.
Absolutely. So nice to meet everyone. Adam Paul. I lead procurement at Analog Devices. It's a global semiconductor company. Probably many of you haven't heard of us, but 125,000 customers, 75,000 products. So very wide product mix, breadth and depth. And really, I lead procurement end-to-end, so owning the full process, and we're going through a source-to-pay transformation right now. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the session.
Hi, everybody. Reginald Butler. I'm a director with BMO, Bank of Montreal, in their supply chain finance group. Our team is primarily focused on helping our clients unlock liquidity, working capital, supplier wellness, things of that nature. So happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Reg and Adam. Let's dive into it on the topic of shadow spend. As companies move to decentralized buying, how can finance and procurement provide employee flexibility without losing that single source of truth for company spend? Adam, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, so I think from the practitioner side, when we start this, we generally think about shadow spend as an employee issue problem, but it's really a procurement design problem. It's a design problem. So I think back to like when I was in college, we took a landscape architecture class, and they show this beautiful image of a park. And you see all these beautiful pathways through the park and the grass around it. And at the very bottom, and many of you may have seen this image, there's a pathway that goes around, and then there's a walking path that people have created where they've ruined the grass, because the quickest way to get from here to here is that walking path. And it's kind of like that with your procurement system. If you create all these levers and you have to go this way and you can't do that and you need to do this, people are gonna find workarounds. When you make that easy path and the path you want them to follow to be the right path, people are generally going to follow that path. So when I hear shadow spend and all these words we use, I don't blame the employee. The employee is trying to do their job. We in procurement or a support organization help employees do their job, whether it's an engineer who needs to buy that part to go to the customer, the salesperson who needs to put up a booth at a conference. They're not procurement experts. They want to know how to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible to solve their problem. And we need to help enable them to do that. And so that's really the way I look at it, is like, how do you build your process and your system design in a way that enables them to not use shadow spend?
Yeah, I agree completely. I don't think people break rules because they have bad intentions. They're just trying to get their job done, right? So I don't think it's about pushing people to use clunky systems and broken process. It's really, how can we make it as simple as like consumer buying experience? All they need to know is what they need to buy and why they need to buy it. They don't need to, figure out what the chart of account is or what is the billing code. A normal user doesn't know these information. And that's how we can really leverage AI, right? Pre-fill those informations. Or if your processes require the user to get a certain approval or get a contract signed, have guided workflows to guide them. And that's how you can reach, avoid shadow spend and bring visibility to the finance teams.
Thanks, Michelle. Reg?
No, I just want to echo something that Adam mentioned earlier. It is around that governance. If you're going to have flexibility, it has to be designed within the system, and that data ownership has to be there in order to give them the flexibility.
Thank you. And what about hidden costs? FX fees, wire costs, manual labor. Michelle, how can we use some of the technologies that you talked about earlier to manage those effectively?
Yeah, I think there are a few ways payment tech can help with this. We spent so much time negotiating the contract to get down to cost, but we forget all the hidden costs, right? I talked about all the manual work that people put in. Another example I heard recently is teams are spending time converting the unit of measure on the PO. So maybe you buy something that's quoted in pounds, and then when the invoice comes in, it's in cases. So they have to now figure out, okay, how many units of things are in a case, how many pounds per unit it is, and they're manually doing that math just to do the matching. So, technology can definitely help automate a lot of that. But one cost that people don't really talk about is fraud and error. Again, this is where I think technology is great, right? AI can easily detect if your supplier invoice number is out of sequence from what you're used to, it's in a different format. Or recently, I was testing something that's pretty amazing. I fed a bank letter, a fake bank letter to AI, and it's able to detect things like, hey, the branding is a little bit off, or the PO box on that bank letter belongs to a certain state where the bank does not have a branch in, so this is suspicious. I can't imagine a human being able to go through all of these thinking process to identify that. So that's another way to really reduce hidden cost. And then last but not least, I think beyond savings, we should also think about how do we generate income for the company. So payment tech allows you to pay your suppliers via virtual card where you can get a really sizable rebate over time. Or leverage early pay discounts and generate money so finance becomes a strategic function and not just a cost center.
That payment tech really reveals what you paid and what you thought you paid, or what you bought and what you actually paid. Yeah.
And I think part of this is procurement and sales both have kind of ruined this for everyone, right? Because salespeople are only concerned and incentivized by how many dollars are on the sales at the end of the day, right? Once you get in talking about payment terms or how it's paid, they're like, I don't care, that's somebody else, that's not me. And I'm trying to push even my procurement team to say, hey, we care about end-to-end costs, right? If you can get an extra 30 days, an extra 60 days at the end of that, that's worth money to the company. That cash is worth money. So starting to incentivize and goal DPO, and when I say DPO, I mean actual DPO. So like my team spent a lot of time looking at what is our actual payables versus what's on our contracted payables, and how divergent are those two numbers. Because you may have suppliers that fight you tooth and nail and say, hey, you can only have 45 days. And then I talk to them and we're paying them in 60. We're not getting any letters, we're not getting any shutdown notices. So we spend all this time arguing on why it had to be 45 and not 60, and no one cares at the end of the day. And this happens all the time. And I think you talked about, discounted cash flow. Like as you start looking at that, like, okay, maybe I'll pay you in 15 days, but I want to get a 2% hit on that, right? That stuff adds a lot of value and drives a lot of costs. So trying to look at TCO on a bigger lens is where we're going.
So Adam just described my life. So on the sales side, we're going in as a bank to our clients with a product that we think, and a payment check that we think can solve those problems. But we have the arguments with the procurement guys like Adam on why this works and why this makes sense. And our edict, we really try to start at the CFO level, because the CFO understands how that PO relates to the bottom line and how it relates to working capital, and say, hey, guy, I really need your help for me to push this down and push it through the organization. But all of those metrics that you talk about, that's my life when I go into your client to try and offer this product. Yeah.
So, Reg, I'll come to you. Procurement obviously lives in the PO, finance in the bank statement. What for you is the one technology or process change that really bridges that gap? So the Treasury, for example, knows exactly what's leaving the account and can effectively manage that process.
That's a really interesting question for me, and one that I actually have talked to my Treasury and Payment Services team, who are much more expert than I am when it comes to the payment process. And the struggle for me was the before part of your question, like how do Treasury and Finance handle the before? BMO's got some products that kind of act like a bridge in those API kind of real-time payment structures, but I didn't really get a good answer for the before. I got a very interesting old school answer on how to handle that. They said communication, like pick the phone up and call the person on the other end. But I'll ask Michelle, like the before, is there something out there that can handle that?
Yeah, so from our perspective at Coupa, that's the problem we've been trying to solve, right? We can't have siloed functions. So we built a platform that can provide visibility from request to PO, to invoice, to payments, to cash management. So as soon as a PO comes in, you can send that information to the Treasury team. So kind of like what you said, communicate with the Treasury team, but just electronically in the system. So they see the cash forecast on day one. And then as it moves through the process, you get the invoice, you update that forecast. So Treasury teams can get visibility into what's coming and they can plan their cash flow better.
Yeah, I think when I talk to my Treasury team, their biggest complaint, they don't care what payment terms we agreed to. They want to have consolidated and good understanding of like when is cash coming in and when is cash going out. And at the end of the day, like the perfect world is you using your customers' money to pay your suppliers, right? That's the perfect cash flow cycle. They want to know when those big payments are happening and they don't want to be surprised. Because if they have all the money invested in the market and they have to pull it out to go pay a supplier because a surprise bill came in, they're not very happy. So that's what I see it as. That's really the goal of us, is to make sure they do have that end-to-end visibility.
Is that a challenging process? How do you manage that effectively?
It's not easy for sure, especially when you're doing, hundreds of thousands of payments a month, right? There's a lot of small transactions, they add up, right? Each individual transaction may not be material, but the sum of them is. And then if you get any of those surprise transactions, you thought it was coming next week and it comes this week, it can be a big deal.
Okay. And what about supplier experience? Michelle, I know this is something you've talked about. Are we losing value because payment terms, onboard processes can be challenging, clunky for suppliers? First, where is the value lost there? And I guess how do we overcome that?
Yeah, a supplier experience is definitely something we need to pay attention to, right? It takes two sides to tango. And if you don't have an easy supplier onboarding experience, or if the supplier does not get paid easily, they're not going to give you the best payment terms. They're not going to give you the best price. They're not going to let you take the first look at limited inventory, right? So it's very important. And again, because I come from a technology background, we're constantly thinking of ways to make that process as easy as possible. So imagine when a supplier comes onto the network and they share information with a particular customer, then when new customers come onto the network, we can automatically use technology to share that information and not make the supplier go through the same information phase again, right? Or imagine a supplier uploads a SOC 2 report onto the network. We can use AI to parse that report and then fill in any incoming questionnaire by other customers and really leverage AI to help ease the friction on the supplier side. And that's how you can have a happy supplier and a resilient supply chain.
And I think what that feeds into from a practitioner perspective is we want as many suppliers in the bid as possible, right? That drives competition, that drives best price, that drives best solution. So the more friction you make it in how to get them into that process and how to get them to get the right information out of the process is critical. I've been through many bids where in the middle of the bid, they submit a bid to you and you're like, how did you get to this number? It's so far off. And you find out they were thinking about a different product or they didn't read it right. And you end up wasting a lot of time because of that friction of getting our systems to talk and connect to each other. And that's especially important when we get into this age of AI, right? We'll talk more about this, but in an AI world, you're putting more and more and more on the machines, right? You're saying, okay, I know what this number is. I should quote this way. You're submitting that bid, but you didn't actually look at it. And then at the end, your customer's getting it and saying, what is this? This is not what I wanted, because we're taking more and more humans out of the loop. So it is very important that that data is accurate and that you're putting as many people through as seamless a process as possible to get in and get that actual data.
From the banking side, what we are hearing from our clients, they're looking for solutions around what they call supplier wellness. So as I mentioned, the products that I offer are designed for liquidity and working capital. And when I first joined the bank 12 years ago, that's all we were talking about. Coming out of COVID, a lot of companies realized that they had maybe smaller downstream mom and pop size suppliers who were very critical though to their product and to their supply chain. And so they were looking for ways to keep them healthy downstream, because if they go under, that was really gonna cause a big ripple upstream. And so the payment tech and various platform solutions out there that can help with the onboarding, as you mentioned, and make that seamless, allow us to get cash downstream, is all super important now to our clients to keep their supply chain well, so to speak.
Thank you. And we often ignore the bottom 20% of suppliers because the manual effort sometimes doesn't equate to the savings. You talked about AI, Adam, probably a good intro to that now. If an AI agent can autonomously run mini tenders, purchases, and so on, how does the definition of strategic sourcing change and shift as we kind of move through that AI adoption process?
Yeah, so I'm kind of tired of hearing about how AI is going to take all of our jobs at this point. But I think when we think about strategic sourcing, right, I've never met a procurement person who has said, my team is big enough to manage every dollar we spend. If you have that, you're great. I want to talk to you after. But no one has that. So we all have this, we call it tail spend or unmanaged spend or whatever word you use, and we kind of throw it in a bucket, say it doesn't matter, and forget about it. I think in an AI world, the benefit is now you're having an ability to manage all of your spend. But it's really about setting the rules change, right? It's now about setting rules and structures and guidelines around how you manage that spend. versus the individual negotiation. So you're going to say like, okay, on this spend category, I want you to use one of these 3 suppliers. I want you to do 3 bids and a buy when it's over this much dollars. I want you to do this, that, or the other thing. When you set those rules and guidelines and you put it into your system, you can now manage every dime of spend. Now you're not going to have a human looking and worrying about like, am I getting the best price for paper clips? But you're going to actually get the best price for paper clips, which you aren't doing now. So I see it as a great expansion of our rules where, yes, you're still going to have your biggest, most strategic suppliers that you're going to have humans managing. That's not going to change, but your category managers are going to be able to span the entire span of your spend. You're going to know where every dime's going. You're going to have data that can back up, like, why did you choose Staples versus Office Depot versus Amazon Business for that item, right? You're going to have that data. Whereas today you're saying like, all right, I have one, I use them, that's great, I'm managing my tail spend. You're really not. But really the key is setting up that rules engine and that structure that allows you to manage that spend holistically.
So Adam, you and I talked about this a little bit because I'm very old school. I'm always the last to adopt technology. So I'm old enough to have had an 8-track, and then when things went to cassette, I held onto my 8-track. Then cassettes came out. I was like, oh, that's just a fad. Then CDs. So I've always been the last one. And I promised myself that I would be quicker to adapt to AI. But my concern around that, like you and I talked about the staples and paper clips. A senior guy like yourself should not be bothered with the paper clips. But what about the smell tests, like the art of the work that you do? How do you feel about AI, like with that piece of it?
Yeah, and I think that's where we were talking earlier, right? The challenge for where we're worried about kind of let's use the word younger generation coming up is like, we came up and learned how the process is made. We were forced to learn it because we didn't have good tech to do it for us. Now when people are coming up, you can put that full question you got into AI and it will answer it. Before you couldn't do that. Like Google search, unless it had that exact question, you weren't going to get the answer. So it's a challenge now, and the benefit we have as seasoned practitioners is we can look at things, and I was telling Reg, like my job today is generally to look at my team's work and point out the things that I'm worried about and find those factoids very quickly in very limited data, right? That's what I spend my day doing. That's not because I'm smarter than my team. That's just because I've been around and I know how it was all built. And I'm like, that number can't be right. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass that sniff test. Right. So I do think we'll still have that place when we go in and we say, okay, my rules engine ran. It tells me I can save $1 billion on tail spend. Like, I know I only have $200,000 of tail spend or $200 million. Like, I can't save $1 billion. It's not physically possible. But the AI told me I could, so I go to my boss and present it. Right. And I think that's where that sniff test comes in.
Yeah.
I agree completely. I also don't think AI is taking our jobs away, right? It's really helping us to be more productivity and become more strategic. And I think back to your point about, you're able to source every single dollar now. And it's not just about getting the best price. It's also talking about the visibility. So your finance team can get 100% visibility of the spend. And I think that's also priceless.
So you talk about obviously AI not taking our jobs. You as leaders, is there a cultural element to the change and the transformation when it comes to adopting AI? I mean, how do you kind of manage that aspect with teams and I guess with the wider function?
It's such a great question. I'm watching it at my firm, and we're being very, very slow and very thoughtful around how we manage that. I think it's evolving. The thing that scares me is just the rate that AI is creating change. That 8-track to cassette took me some time, and I had some window for that. I still have my vinyl, by the way. But this Office 365 to Copilot, like, it's really fast. So I don't know. I'm holding on very tightly, and I'm watching things as they evolve for my children, but I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure.
Yeah, I've been setting it with my team as a positive, right? If you make it a challenge and a fun positive, and you basically embrace the elephant in the room and you say, this is going to change our jobs. Like point blank, that is a period statement. I think all of us agree to that. It's going to change our jobs. When you make that the impetus and you say, how can we embrace this and allow it to do things for us? I talk about it in every staff meeting. I talk about it in every all hands I have. I broadcast who the top users are by usage. We talk about how they're using it. When you make it fun and interesting and exciting, and you show that like, hey, as we've gone through this change, like no one's disappeared off the team, right? Maybe my analysts are becoming more like data enablers or tech enablers rather than analysts. That's fine, that's a different job, but they're still here. As a category manager, you're still negotiating with suppliers, you're still managing those contracts. Maybe you're managing twice as many, but you're still doing the same work. I think when you do it in that way and you kind of embrace it as the elephant in the room, it comes across a lot better than hiding from it, being like, oh, don't worry, nothing's gonna change. We're all still gonna be here doing the same thing. Like, it's an unrealistic expectation, especially in a company that's tech. We're a tech company. Like my CEO talks about it every time. We can't not embrace it or I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be working for somebody else, so.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind is don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to go from 0 to 100, right? Test things out incrementally. I talked about a lot of AI use cases that we're thinking for the payment space, right? So start by trying to use AI to save you a few hours of manual work on day one. And then maybe progress to, hey, how can I use AI to catch fraud that I otherwise cannot catch, right? And then eventually you're gonna get to a fully autonomous process. So just take it step by step, take it small wins at a time, and then eventually you'll get there.
Great. Okay, so while we're on the subject of skills changing, looking to the future and in closing, what would you say is the one skill a procurement professional needs to learn about finance and vice versa in order to stay relevant? And I guess deal with the change that's coming on the horizon. Reg, at the end of the line, I'll start with you on that one.
Sure. So I think, both they have to learn from opposite directions. Procurement needs to understand how their payment terms, their timing, their structure move into working capital and how that becomes working capital. Finance needs to understand the artistry that's in procurement, in negotiation, to get to those payment terms, what that structure really means on both sides. So it's just understanding that we're not at cross purposes, and that's old school communication.
Sure. Yeah, I think from procurement, it's definitely the cash flow side, right? Cash flow and working capital. It's not something we're taught. It's not something we're brought up with. You can have huge impacts. I know some of my team, they'll be like, oh man, I can get a great deal if I go buy a ton of this item. And I'm like, where are we gonna store it? What's the weighted average cost of capital? What's the tied up cost? Yeah. But they look at it as like, but I can get a bigger discount if I go buy truckloads of this thing right now. Not necessarily the best move overall. And then on the finance side, I think they tend to be too focused on the balance sheet and bank account, right? They're very account focused and they need to look bigger, especially in the world today where we have tariffs and we have all these other things going on. So like, okay, that shipment that's coming in, that's $20. Like, how does that actually break up? Where's it coming from? What's the transportation cost? What's the full cost there? And what's the risk of I'm buying from this company that's way out here that needs to be on a boat that needs to come in through a port? There's a lot of risk there in bigger picture. So I think to Reg's point, like, how do you get finance to understand the overall business and the bigger picture of the business so that they understand why procurement's, losing their mind and not going with the cheapest option, and why we're saying like, hey, we buy a lot of chemicals. Like, I want to buy my chemicals locally because I don't want the risk of that, pilot deciding he does not want to put it on his airplane, because they can choose, I don't want that on my airplane, I'm not going to fly it. That flight gets delayed and my factory shut down. That's a big problem. And that's a pilot's decision, right? There's these little things that aren't realized in the bigger picture, and you have to get really close to your business to understand that. I think procurement through COVID and some of the issues we've had has gotten a lot closer to our business. I think finance to some extent, in some cases, still tends to be kind of in a silo off to the side, and that's really not helpful.
Yeah, I guess the only thing to add is, like Adam said, finance focus a lot on numbers, and those are important. But I think they also need to remember that there's a supplier relationship going on, right? You need to help your procurement team to build that relationship, because if you have a good relationship with supplier, that's where, they help you build your business, right? So I think keeping that in mind is also very important.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. We've worked through the questions. We've got a little bit of time left before we wrap up the day for any questions in the audience. Does anyone have any questions? Please put your hands up. Yep, at the front here, we've got a microphone. We won't make you shout, so just bear with us. If you just hold it closely so we can hear you.
Good. Hi, everyone. This is really interesting. Thank you for providing insights. I know we talked a lot about AI in so far as efficiency, like being able to cover more spend than you otherwise could, et cetera. I'm curious if you've seen any ways or even have any beliefs in which you think AI will turn someone who is like, let's call it a 99th percentile procurement practitioner into a 99.9 percentile practitioner. Like how do we use this technology to be better at our jobs than we could have ever been before, other than just like save us a bunch of time here and there?
I guess I could take that from the practitioner side. So I think it depends on the person, right? At the end of the day, you're only going to get out what you put in. So like I've had my team members use it as a negotiation prep. You can actually negotiate against an AI agent. It actually does a pretty good job. If you give it enough data points and you say like, hey, here's their proposal, here's me, build counterpoints and negotiate with me, it'll actually do a really good job. So I've seen my team use it that way. Any of the negotiation prep stuff, I used to spend tons of time, my team, making these slide decks with all the details of who's at the meeting and what do we need to talk about and what are they going to be asked for. Now you can kind of build those in about 5 minutes. You're like, hey, I'm going to this meeting. We're talking about tariffs. Tell me what their tariff position is. Tell me what their CFO said on the last 3 earnings calls. Tell me what the impact is to their P&L. AI can pull all that for you very quickly. So you can become a pretty adept negotiator very quickly. But I think it's all about the person at the end of the day. Like that person who is driven and wanted to learn is going to learn very quickly, and they're going to learn much quicker using AI. But if they're not motivated, it's not going to turn a B performer into an A performer. It might turn your A into an A plus, but I don't think it's going to turn your B into an A.
Thank you, Adam. Michelle or Reg, anything to add on that one?
No.
No.
I think the only thing to add is similar to what I was saying about using AI to detect fraud in a bank letter, right? I don't think that's just about efficiency gain. It's really about AI pointing out things that I would never think of. So I think there are lots of ways AI can help.
Great. Okay, thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. We can sneak one more. Oh, we've got a couple at the front. You had your hand up first. Carl, we'll go ahead. Thank you.
This question is for Reg on the supply chain financing point. And by the way, I have finals as well. I think it's a trust issue. On the technology, and I'd rather to see other people fail first and then spend their money and then I can test it, right? On the supply chain financing, the interest rate is not going down. The Fed is not moving quickly as expected. Meanwhile, commodity pricing has been uprising, right? And the challenges that I see for implementing supply chain financing is really not about procurement people doesn't understand how it impacted the bottom line. They understand it. It's very simple, straightforward calculation on the per cash flow. The questions is about how do you see the challenges are shared by your client who have been trying to implement the supply chain financing? Like how are they doing the negotiations? Because you're really facing all different categorized suppliers. So some of them can be 20 times bigger than you are. Some of them can be the mama papa shop who has zero interest in do supply chain financing. There will be supply chain what, right? So how do you combat that?
Sure. So for us at BMO, we do a lot of work at the very beginning of the program of really understanding that supplier spend. As you said, some may be bigger and have more leverage. Some are mom and pops. And so along with procurement and during our data research, we're looking at who these suppliers are. But I think it really starts at the very beginning, as I was saying, with that CFO and with the senior leaders of the why. What's the so what? Why are you doing this? Why are you asking for me to go from 30 days to 60 days? What's the message? And so I think a lot of work has to be done with the message, and then from there, taking that message and then crafting what might be your talking points. Okay, if when you come out with your message here, you're going to hear this pushback. What's your answer to that? And then, the math is the math. So you're looking at your supplier's cost of capital versus what it might be for them taking this discount. But it really starts, I think, with what's the so what? What's the reason that you're asking for this extension? And then it goes from there. And I will say some banks do it better than others. Yeah.
Thank you, Reg. I think we'll have one more question. Did you have your hand up there? Thank you. Sorry, we're running out of time. Any questions we can take at the end? Apologies. One more. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aryan, co-founder of a startup called TradeForm. I wanted to say thank you guys for providing your insights. Had a question about, it's not only AI that we're seeing as like a disruption, but also, macroeconomically, there's a lot of different things going on, all around the world that's, affecting procurement and like finance teams as well. So just kind of curious to see, how you guys are using AI to potentially help accelerate like the different workflows to handle, a lot of that chaos. And if you're not able to, like, what's the biggest bottleneck there? Like, why? What's the biggest thing that needs to be figured out in order to be able to kind of move at a faster velocity here?
Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we knew what was going to happen, that would be the best thing, right? If somebody can forecast disasters, let me know. I want to talk to you after. And I think, in my decade or so I've been in supply chain, it seems like the magnitude and quantity of disasters seems to be increasing. It doesn't seem to be a decreasing trend. And we are a much more connected world than we may all want to believe. And so something that happens, the Iran conflict, everyone hears the headline news articles. You see the big, okay, well, oil costs here are going up. You see the big headlines. You don't see the undercurrents of like, there's a big sulfur shortage and, we're going into gardening season in the US and sulfur is a big use in fertilizer and that's driving sulfur prices. And there's a lot of these undercurrents that you don't really see. So I think some of that is access to the data, right? And understanding, and that tier end supplier mapping. I see a lot of people here from those companies that do it. Like that tier end supplier mapping is very, very difficult. And so I think that's an area where, AI can help us. But at the end of the day, if we can't forecast that the Ever Given's going to block the Suez Canal or that, there's going to be an invasion of a country, it's really hard because you don't know what that next thing's going to be. So you can't really plan for that.
Yeah, I would say as closing is you can't predict the future. AI is not a magic crystal ball, but it can help connect the dots and send you signals as quickly as possible so you can react as quickly as possible. That's how I would think about it.
Great. There we go. That's the end of day one. Thank you, panel. Please give them.